the board how important the redesign has been for the itinerant programs and how much work the regional directors, the regional supervising teachers, the lead teachers have put into the redesign. 2 years of work that we have tirelessly put into the redesign. And I am fearful that in not offering this contract and getting rid of the position, the redesign will lose traction and stop. And all of the hard work that's been put into it will have been for nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Astrid Goodstein on number 7.01. There she is.
I'll start with 7.02 and 7.06 first, and then I will move back as time allows. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you all. My name is Astrid. I am a retired professor and administrator from Gallaudet. I now live here in the Valley. Before I go into 7.06 and beyond, I would like to take this opportunity to say how thrilled I am by the new leadership of the board. Congratulations, Sue Kay. The community has the utmost trust in your leadership based on your history, and we are looking forward to working with the board and working with Superintendent Reichman and the community at large. We all share the same vision, passion, and love for deaf children in Arizona at both of our campuses. We have been thrilled by the passage of 3 laws that are moving us forward. Those bills have been SB 1092, the Arizona's version of Lead K. ACDHH currently holds the responsibility for looking into metrics and into standards. We have established data measurement, and I'm happy to be a part of the task force that has reported that ASDB is going to be taking one of the lead roles in this field, which is a big point of responsibility and will put you on the map for the future. Another exciting expansion has been the passage of extra funding for expanding the early learning program as well as family mentors. That has been very exciting, and it's been exciting to watch that grow and thrive. Congratulations to Kendra. Third, a small but still significant passage. In recognition of Annette's leadership, ASDB has always been a local education agency, or at least has been acting as one. It has never been actually recognized as one. And so putting that into law has actually been a big step forward for us. I see that in Maria Murphy's update, in her legislative update, and updates about what's going on with the legislature and how the board is responsible for policy changes, Annette, as superintendent, it is her responsibility to let the board know what's happening within the legislature and make sure that policy is in line with different changes than things that she's responsible for, making sure that things are in line. Some of her recommendations to the board have been accepted and moved on. Some have been rejected. And some have simply been not put on the agenda by the former president. I've seen a pattern of how her proposals are sometimes tweaked or disregarded. I'll let the interpreter catch a breath. I would like this opportunity to speak a little bit about Superintendent Reichman's background. Like I said, I was a professor at Gallaudet and at another nationally recognized college, NTID. We reported to Annette when she was in the Department of Education, working for the federal government. She was making sure that our policies were in line with the federal government, and she was responsible for ensuring policy enactment. That was such a huge responsibility, and I think we're so incredibly lucky to have someone with that skill set bringing to the table. Not many superintendents have the background that she does, and we have been excited to work more in collaboration with her and with the community at large, parents included. Thank you.
Moving on to Dr. Harvey Goodstein.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Harvey Goodstein. I'll be speaking to agenda item 7.02 in relation to the amendment to 1042. As I understand it, many of us in the community are aware of this proposed bill, this strike everything bill, and the proposed amendments. If this passes as written, then that means that for ASDB, we will no longer be a program for the deaf and hard of hearing. Yes, she can't see me if I stand in front of the camera, though. Oh, I see. All right, sorry, guys. The community, oh, okay. I'll try my best to make sure that Miss Bove can see me. She's the only deaf person up here? Okay,
I got you, you're good.
All right. For understanding, I'm sensitive to access needs for our deaf people.
We're just going to pause so we can actually move the camera to help out in every way that we can.
Well, can Miss Bove see me? Okay. Thank you. Anyways, so if this proposed bill passes as it is currently written, then that means that ASDB will no longer be a school or a program for the deaf. This will be in direct conflict with current policies of ASDB. Many deaf members of the community have sent letters to our representatives and our senators. We have contacted senators already because of the level of concern we have. However, we are upset that this board has chosen to wait until now to act. Things can happen at lightning pace. Things can be fast-tracked, and we wouldn't know. I was stunned that the board did not call some sort of special meeting or emergency meeting with the purpose of making sure that this is an actionable item for our staff. And we could ask them to stand in opposition to the bill that is this serious. While I'm here, I would like to add that as a former professor of math at Gallaudet University, I also served on several school boards, including the Board of Trustees at Gallaudet University. Commonly, the board is a policy-making board. It's a group of people who make policy. And the administrators of the programs are typically left to the business of running the schools, whether that be the superintendent or principals. Based on the meeting that happened most recently, the board has decided to override recommendations by your superintendent and has directed funds to other schools and agencies, for example, Desert Voices, that is out of ASDB's umbrella, which is direct violation of current policy. If I could refer you to the current policy, Section B, Code BDD. The superintendent and board relations. This is very simple. There's 3 sections here, as everybody can see. In short, the policy says that the implementation of the policy is a responsibility of the board. Correct. In the second section, it says the superintendent is responsible for the administration of ASDB. The superintendent knows what is best for our students here, for our deaf, blind, hard of hearing students here. The board doesn't work here. And the board seems, frankly, to be forcing its own will onto the superintendent, which is in direct violation of standing policy. And I feel like that should be voided. During the former administration, President Sims, and then most recently, President Nigro, the board was frankly quite oppressive, not only to the superintendent, but to other members of the board. I am very hopeful with the new leadership, with Suke. I have faith in her that she will lead the board in the right direction, so that from here on out, Superintendent Reichman can feel comfortable talking with the board and asking for ideas and being able to design new programs and move things forward. We rely on you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Eric Cardenas, related to contracts. Yeah.
Hi, I'm in 5th grade. Carrie should not work here next fall because what happened in November when she came into my classroom and she called my friends names such as an animal and threatened to call 911 on him and told him that he couldn't act like this in the real world. She yelled at him in class. And my teacher, Miss Emily, tried to defend him and said, "Get out, please stop." But Carrie wouldn't stop, even though he was crying, and said he couldn't control it because he has tics. She made my friends sad, and that made me so mad. Carrie told my mom what happened, and told my friends, told their moms, told them that he was just too loud. And she continues to look at me, to try to intimidate me. She'll stand close by and make me feel unsafe at school. I stay home a lot of days because she makes me afraid to be at school. And a teacher should not make kids afraid to be at school. I have a safety plan, but Carrie continues to violate it by being in the cafeteria because there's a new student in the cafeteria. But that new student isn't even in her class. She's mean to her students and to other students on campus every day. My mom has talked about pulling me out and taking me to a different school, but I want to stay at PDSD, and I should be able to stay at PDSD for middle school. I just don't want to get in trouble with my friends and with Carrie. She's very mean. She tells bad jokes to my friends, and she calls my mom for nothing. But yet she's not in trouble. We try not to instigate anything, but she goes out of her way to be in our face. The principal should be penalizing her. If teachers aren't teaching how to be appropriate and she's hurting kids around her, she should be in her own classroom, separated away from us. And that's the safety plan, but she keeps violating it. She just can't stop.
Thank you. Next is Amy Young, related to non-renewal of contracts.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Go real close.
How about now? Okay. Yeah. Hi, my name is Amy. I am a mother here of Brody Young that attends a PDSD. My son Brody was mainstream school until about 2019 when we visited ASDB campus. Brody fell in love with the campus and the culture. We knew then what we had to do. He wanted to go to ASDB that year. It was a struggle for him when he attended there because he did miss home. So the next year we knew that we had to move to Phoenix for him to attend a deaf school, but also be home with his family. We never had any issues with PDSD up until this year. After Carrie verbally abused a student right in front of him, he has been terrified. He refuses to go to school. He wants to switch to another school, which my son was very excited to come to this school. And now he hates it. He wants to go to a mainstream school. He's being bullied almost every day since this incident for standing up to his friend, which is exactly what will happen if Carrie Gemmer stays here and her contract is renewed next year. He will be attending to a new school. He does not feel safe here, as we had to get an injunction of harassment against her so that my son could go to school and be safe. This should never have happened if Annette Reitman would have responded fast and put her on an admin leave and communicated with the parents. I also believe Annette Reitman's contract shouldn't be renewed. She admitted to us parents that communication fell through the cracks on this, which blows my mind. There was no way that communication fell through the cracks when we emailed her and the board many times. This is a serious situation. This should have been taken serious since day one. Since then, our students were put on a safety plan. It has been violated over 3 times. Since then, we had to resort to the law. My son isn't safe here at PDSD, so why should I send him here next year? Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Talisha, and I can't read the last name. Evans? Nevins. Thank you.
Coming here, I thought I would be prepared, but I guess I'm not. First of all, we all know what Annette Reichman did, what Carrie Gamar did, and her contract should not be renewed. She should not be in this school. She is not safe. She has been bullying students for years, not just my child, but other children as well. When my son had an altercation with another student, that child said that he would tell Carrie on him as a threat, and my son immediately shut down. It is well known the way that she treats students and the way that she treats staff. Everyone that she comes in contact with feels unsafe here. It has been a constant struggle since the incident happened, and I don't understand why she's still here. In a normal circumstance at a public school, this wouldn't be happening. I'm asking you to not renew Carrie, and I'm asking you not to renew Annette Reichman's contract either, because she has not demonstrated good leadership as ASDB superintendent. She should be providing transparent and consistent communication, which she has not been. For almost 4 months since this incident happened, I have gotten 2 communications. The one was not personal. It was just a form letter, and names were switched out, and it was sent out. It went to 3 of us mothers. We all got the exact same letter. And the next one, the second one, was throwing, It said Jill will see you, which is throwing Jill under the bus because she had just gotten here. She wasn't here when the incident occurred, and it was completely inappropriate. It completely blew my mind. She also has thrown George Martin under the bus at the last board meeting. The comments that she said that were not addressed, and Mr. Martin said that they weren't true, and I believe him. I absolutely believe him. She does not communicate well. She never has. Superintendent Martin, I looked at his background. He has been an educator. He has done quite a bit of education and educational direct instruction as well as leadership, and I don't think that Annette is capable of changing. I don't think that she wants him here because he wants to change things. The community, some of you might have faith in her, but I don't. And I think it's enough of this. It's time to change. Get these folks out of here. And I'm glad that President Negro was no longer here. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's okay. This is, I am not able to see the signing members because of the camera, so I'm in a tough spot. I can no longer see the public comment being made by signers.
Can we get the camera maybe moved again?
That won't do it. Yeah, she moved the camera. It was fine before she moved the camera, so now it's not. Yeah. No, I understand. So, as a deaf person on the board, I'd like for it to be moved, please. Wherever, I don't know, you set it up that way. I don't know what's going to be best for you as far as the monitors and people who are watching the stream.
Can she stand at the podium, please?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you. Is that okay with everyone else? Yeah. Okay.
Next, I have Jason Schmidt related to SB 1402. Sorry. For signing and 3 for the other. I don't know what. That's why.
Okay, checking my visibility here. I think, are we all good? Okay. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Congratulations to a new president, Suke Kanaifo. This is my first time speaking to the board. My name is Jason Schmidt, and I am the Arizona Association of the Deaf president. I've been serving the community for almost 4 years. For 4 years now. I have been taking a pulse on community concerns, and SB 1402 is a significant concern. It is not in alignment with ASDB at all. ASDB is designed to be a school for the deaf and blind. It is supposed to be an environment that is friendly for children with sensory impairments and is supposed to be 100% accessible in American Sign Language. Mixing with other students that have different needs and don't use ASL is in conflict with our policy and our mission as a school for the deaf and blind. For our students who are deaf, blind, or deaf and blind, that is the environment that we should be preserving for them. We have brought together the community and tried to work out a strategic plan, and I know that the board is working on that as well. The staff is working on that, but we want to keep this as a sacred place for our deaf community. There is no need to continue to change it. We would like to see that it be kept the way that it is. Leave well enough alone is what we're asking for. Our students should come to school here to feel safe. They should be able to learn in their primary language, and that should be our priority. And this is the place in Arizona for our students to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Marcy Berenberg, related to contracts and Senate Bill 1402.
First, I would would like to make a
Excuse
correction.
me. Can you get real close to the mic, please? Thank you.
First, I would like to make a correction. I'm Eric Cardenas' mom. I have never been in contact with Carrie. Carrie has never contacted any of us, never apologized to any of the kids, never called us. The interpreting was wrong, and that's okay. He signs fast and often not very clearly. His entire comment is on the public site, on the ASDB website, if you guys want the full of what he actually was trying to get across. I want to talk also about Carrie and her contract and how I feel it definitely should not be extended. There have been comments that maybe she was having a bad day or something went wrong or she was super stressed. Absolutely not acceptable answers for coming in and berating a student. Not acceptable for continuing to break a safety plan. Whether or not she was given directive from the principal to break the safety plan, she knew better. 3 parents were compelled to go to see judges and get injunctions against harassment. All 3 were granted by different judges in different courthouses who see it as necessary for protecting these children. These are not the first kids. I have an envelope full of letters from people in the community that either graduated here, currently work here, had a student that was here, or a student themselves who have written letters to say how she abused in the past or the abuses they have witnessed. This school has continually allowed her to get away with this behavior. They have been informed, and I have the notarized letters from people stating that they informed the school of this. As far as SB 1402, I think that would be a huge detriment to the school. President Nigro last time mentioned how we're not necessarily thriving on an academic level. So it's not like we're setting some amazing standard that every other disability should want to come here to get to. We need to continue to grow the program here and get those kids all up to pace. Get them to where they're all able to go out into the workforce and be ready. I don't know the numbers. I didn't verify how far behind students here are. I don't know how accurate his statements were made. But there is no reason to bring in additional disabilities, water down the student population here, and water down the sign language available to the students on this campus. This school needs to remain fundamental to these kids. My son desperately wants to stay here for the next 7 years. I have severe concerns about this as it is. And it's very hard to tell him, yes, you will be able to stay here. And it's absolutely not going to happen if it becomes a dumping ground for any student who IEP didn't work out in their home district.
Thank you. Next, I have Doris Waltman, related to contracts.
Good afternoon, ASDB Board. I stand before you today to share what I see happening.
Doris, can you get a little closer to the mic, please?
Better?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. I stand before you today to share what I see happening to the Itinerant program. Jay Johnson has done an exceptional job bringing the Itinerant program together. Practices and procedures, professional conduct, and professional practices have been his focus, as directed by the ASDB administration. The decision to eliminate Jay's position, in my opinion, is a way to avoid any discussion and input from the staff who have seen the positive outcomes from his leadership. In addition, since the start of the year, the administration has appropriated staff from the Itinerant program for their own use. They did not do their due diligence in finding out all the things that the administrative secretaries do for all the systems to run smoothly. Positions have all gone to the upper administration. All of the work is now left to less staff. They are gutting the Itinerant program piece by piece. Some of our staff are even performing 1.5 jobs. Since the beginning of the year, the assistant superintendent has splintered the regional directors and stripped Jay of the ability to continue on the integration of the program. The Region 2 director reports to the assistant superintendent, who then makes decisions on incomplete and inaccurate information. This has resulted in increased stress to many of the staff in the other regions who have picked up and covered Region 2 responsibilities. The assistant superintendent has and continues to demonstrate biases against people and programs to the detriment of the agency. He has stripped off the interpreters from the regions, which further fractures the itinerant program and cohesion and collaborative services to districts. I've been with the agency since 1980. I have never seen the agency so fractured with such poor communication. And I mean communication that is back and forth, not just information. This is not a place where people's knowledge and skills have been appreciated. Our staff is stressed at the lack of communication of what will be happening in the itinerant programs. The teachers and the staff do have other choices, and this administration complains they're having a hard time recruiting. This is exactly the reason why. Please reach out to the itinerant staff who provide the direct services to our districts and students. You will learn a lot about what has been happening and all the positive changes that Jay has done to bring us together and improve the quality and consistency of services. Thank you.
Thank you. The rest of the comments have been submitted via the internet on the website and are available on the website, so you can read everything there, but the theme was pretty much the same across the board. Did I miss one, Astrid? Yeah. Oh, she did. All right. Astrid, come back up. I think she said 7.01, I think. Sorry.
Yes, 7.01.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to cover one more topic, 7.01. I feel like this is very critical public information for our community to have that I learned just today. This is with Miss Donna Williams and her summary report. It was very fascinating to read. This was the first time I learned that the community can be involved with and reach out to the ombudsperson. I didn't know that. We often talk amongst ourselves and we have somewhat fragmented communication and information coming through, and I'm thrilled to know that Donna is available to the community. Also, in reading her report, I learned that she is establishing focus groups for conversation and sharing of information, which I think will be a wonderful asset to communication. Communication keeps coming up as something that the agency is struggling with, so I'm thrilled that Ms. Williams is new to us fairly recently, from what I understand, in July, and is going to be making some great changes. So I wanted to, in front of everyone, also request that there be a focus group which includes the community, alumni who attended these schools before, and former teachers. Parents, I'm hoping, already have a focus group as well. But we would all love to be able to talk to Ms. Williams and discuss some very significant issues, one of them being the behavior in the classroom of a teacher whose name has already been mentioned, also the division within the community. So I am formally asking Ms. Williams for those focus groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Astrid. And again, the rest of the comments have been posted online and are available for the public view. I do want to say something in regards to Senate Bill 1402. We received a lot of feedback online regarding that. Oh, I missed somebody else. But Senate Bill 1402, please continue to contact your legislators. It's important that they hear this as well. And, hold on. I know that I have, yep, there. I know that I have PV Jance as well. No, those are them. I'm jumping all over the place. Sorry about that. And PV, if you'd like to cover both topics, we'll give you 8 minutes to do that.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, President of the Board, Superintendent and board members, Assistant Superintendents Martin and Cooper, and Superintendent Reichman. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to stand here and make a comment today. First, I want to talk about 6.16, George Martin's contract. I'm specifically asking that you please not renew, and I will give an explanation. I have been very disappointed with how he has processed student and parent complaints. There's a specific person, counselor on campus, using their role as a staff member to support their child in continuing to bully other students, including my son, who is on this campus. We escalated that report, violation of the safety plan at multiple instances. We elevated that to Jill, who elevated that to Assistant Superintendent Martin, who is her supervisor. We had a meeting with him, and we were given reassurances that we would be provided resources and support. That did not happen. I also wanted to discuss the dual role. There are staff who have students, children on this campus, and that has led to a conflict of interest in working in their role as a staff member and their role as a parent. And I was told that that would be addressed, but it has not been, and I have seen my son's safety plan repeatedly violated. So I would like to see Superintendent Reichman involved to finally get to resolution of this. Unfortunately, now we have this pattern on campus of safety plans being violated for multiple students on multiple instances. And it has come to the capacity of Assistant Superintendent Martin's ability to resolve these situations. They have not been resolved, and there is student safety concern for multiple students. I also want to identify a policy that I identified policy that needed to be addressed in terms of conflict of interest. That was never actually addressed, so I'm asking that his contract please not be renewed. Next, I would like to address 7.06, policy JII, student complaints. They should be reported and completed within 30 days, but there is no information provided to parent per policy. So where is the parent involvement or reporting to the parent as to what the incident and resolution was? That language should be included in the policy as well, so that parents are included in that communication. Regarding the ombudsperson, same policy, JII. Students need clear access to the ombudsperson. Students also should have access to policies. There is no ASL interpretation or translation of any of the policies or explanation of procedures in terms of how students can file complaints or how students can contact the ombudsperson. So I ask that you please include that in the process. Students should have access in their first language to policy information. KEB is the next policy I'd like to talk about. This talks about resolution and resolutions being reported, but to whom? It doesn't give resolution to parents. There is no mention in that policy about staff who have students on this campus and the potential conflict of interest that is caused as a result of their dual role. There should be policy guidance on how to address dual role for an individual who is a parent as well as a staff member when their child is interacting with other students, especially if their own child is disciplined or has been reported as a bully. There needs to be procedure in place on dealing with that. BCB is the next policy I'd like to address. There is language about conflict of interest, spousal limitations, not having the spouse of an employee on the board, and that significantly limits who is able to participate from the community, from the deaf community, from the blind community. Those communities are already very small, and I think that language needs to be removed. And again, there should be more language related to conflict of interest regarding dual role in varying situations. My opinion and my suggestion is also to have a referral to ARS 38-501 through 510. IHA talks about focus of reading and language fluency. In my opinion, the focus should be less on reading for our very young children, kinder or preschool through elementary age, and should be focused more on expressive ability and receptive language ability, communication ability, expressing emotions. Once they are able to communicate in all of those key elements, then we can move to reading. They need that language foundation first in being able to understand concepts, communicate their feelings. If they can't, how can we expect them to move forward and immediately start reading? We can't. So I would ask you to reconsider how that is worded and emphasize communication and its critical foundation in language development. IHA, as again, I noticed under H, we're removing health and safety education, and I would like to understand why. That is important. We need to teach our students about their own health and their safety, especially regarding sex education, and even more importantly, safety related to relationships. Please do not remove that piece of education. Observing holidays, I noticed that there's no mention of Deaf Awareness Week, and I'm wondering why. There is no deaf awareness noted in that. There's no mention of White Cane Day. There's no awareness for blind or visually impaired. So I would encourage you to to recognize those in policy as well. Last but not least, LB. I recommend that you as a board consider removing the language that states, excuse me for the interpreter. Remove the language from the last board special session that was held last May. That required the ability to end contracts without the board's approval. I'd like to give that authority back to the superintendent and the leadership team, allow them to do their job. I do request that if the superintendent does intend to not renew a contract or let it lapse, to just let the board know. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1.03, the superintendent's report. Your name? First name is Leslie. You're a non-agenda item. That's later on in the agenda. Okay?
Are we ready for the superintendent's report? Good afternoon, President Neifel, members of the board, the ASDB board, Assistant Superintendent George Martin, and Assistant Superintendent Cooper, and the members of the community here this afternoon with us. I really appreciate you all taking the time to come to our board meeting and the time to talk with us about all of your concerns. Thank you for that. I would like to take some time to thank two previous board members. First is David Nigro. He started on the ASDB board early 2016, and he served on the board for a total of 7 years. He was the board policy expert, and he reviewed almost all of our revisions of policies. So he would review those policies before they were presented to the board for approval. When he became board president, he led the board to develop the strategic plan in 2021. We have been using that strategic plan to give us direction for the future years. I would also like to thank Stephen P.V. Jantz for his 2 years of service on the board as well. He just resigned because of a new job position. As you all know, during his 2 years, PV was an active member involved in reviewing board materials, He was involved in discussions. He asked questions and also contributed many ideas. So we really appreciate his service on our board. So I just wanted to bring some appreciation because I know that this time is volunteer. This is your time that you are volunteering to the agency. You are not paid to do this work as members of the board, and so thank you. It is interesting, you just heard from Harvey Goldstein, and he just stole my thunder, so to speak, because I did plan to talk about our board's policies and the exact same policies that he has pointed out. Those policies really spell out the role and responsibilities of the board of directors and the role and responsibilities of the superintendent. So I will go ahead and comment on that as well now. Our policy says, when you look at the Arizona Constitution and you look at the Arizona statutes, you all are given the authority to govern ASDB as an agency. That's your responsibility. So you have 3 functions within that responsibility. The first function is legislative, excuse the interpreter, and that means you develop policies for the agency. The second function is the executive function. That is the running of the agency, and I will come back to that a little bit later. Third function is the evaluation. You all evaluate the agency's programming and the agency's superintendent. So, how you all evaluate the agency's programming, our successes, and providing education support and services to students, that is our strategic plan. So if you look at our strategic plan, it has very specific measurements. And those measures depend on the data and what the data shows, whether or not we are successful. And it also shows what areas for improvement we have. Going back to the second function, the executive function, that, per policy, is delegated to me as superintendent. I am the CEO of the agency. It is my responsibility to implement policies and to follow the direction that you, the board, give us. So the everyday operations of the agency has been given to me as my responsibility. Every major decision that happens throughout the agency is my decision as superintendent. And that is my role and responsibility in guiding this agency. So the board and the superintendent work together collaboratively, and it is very important for that to happen in order for the agency to be successful. And the agency must be successful for our students to be successful. So today's meeting is a critical meeting because we are talking about contracts. We have 2 kinds of contracts discussed here tonight. One is the leadership team contracts. So your decision about the leadership's contracts will impact the future and the direction that we go. So it is very important. When we look at the leadership contracts, it includes both assistant superintendents, it includes the principals of both campuses, and the directors of our programs. So you see the extensive list on your agenda. Most of those names you'll recognize. You have seen them from years past. One name is not there this year, and that name is Jay Johnson. He is the Director for Itinerant Services, and he did submit his resignation for June 30th, 2023 effective date. So we, at this time, are not planning to replace his position. However, we are open to have that discussion again. As you know, we have 2 new principals. Both of them are in their first year, and I am recommending that both of their contracts be renewed for a second year, starting next fall. We have 4 new names. They're not new directors to the agency, but this is the first time they are being brought to the board on a contract basis, so I will name them. First, we have Oren Chekhov, excuse the interpreter's pronunciation. He is directors of the Organizational Development Division. Second, we have Lisa Yankarelli. She is the director of blind programs. Third, we have Jennifer Scarborough. She is the director of deaf programs. And last, we have Aaron Moya, who is the director of media. And so those 4 contracts will be brought to you for approval. And the intent is to offer contracts to all 4 of them. There is one person that I recommend not to have their contract renewed for the following year. And while I make that recommendation, I do not take it lightly. It was after much thought and a lot of review of documentation and gathering information and putting that all together before I made that recommendation. So if necessary, I will discuss that more in depth later, but I will stop there for now. The final thing I would like to mention is that you all will hear from Maria Murphy later on talking about the recent legislative information and updates. We have been quite active in the legislative sessions, and a lot has been going on. SB 1402 popped up out of nowhere. We had no idea that was going to happen. We've had to move quickly, and we've had to reach out to the community. But we really need your approval to allow us to move forward against this bill. We need your support for this one. So that concludes my report to the board. I'm now available if you have any questions.
Are there any questions for Superintendent Regman? Annette, I do have one follow-up. In your report, you mentioned that you have other items in relationship to why you are not offering a contract. Would that be something if we should go into executive session?
I believe that we must have that discussion in the public session.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Seeing and hearing no questions, I'm going to go on to 1.04, the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction report.
Thank you. Board President, governing board members. Our last board meeting, Board Member Jantz gave a request to support the principals. I walked away from that meeting thinking we have a lot of directors and leaders that need support in this agency. I work with them day to day, hand in hand. So we sent out a survey to the directors, principals, to get feedback. After that, we held a workshop to build a support plan structure to support them through the next year. Some of that structure I put in play, and they gave a lot of feedback. Their feedback was actually spot on. So we looked at having 3 meetings to center our educational resources, beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of year meeting. They're called Boy, Moy, and Oi. These meetings, we will discuss how their goals and plans line up to the strategic plan, what type of resources they will need to carry that out, their staffing, operational considerations. This is to allow us to get ahead and not be so reactive, but operate a little bit more proactively. A lot of these issues that are coming up, we're addressing them since I've been here, just as they just go off. We also talked about one of the big issues, concerns that we needed focus. We talked about having a state of the agency kickoff meeting, which is a statewide meeting that focuses our direction, our purpose of where we're going with this agency, where we're going with curriculum and instruction. That will also help the directors and help with their teams as well as far as support. We stress the importance of ideation sessions, time for directors to get together, to brainstorm, to talk shop, to talk about best practices. I know as a leader, when you're in day-to-day, you do not have time to do that. And those meetings are very important for supporting the leaders. Looking in how we could also support those directors, we need superintendent development as a cabinet. We need to understand what it means to be a leader, what it means to run a school. I know that firsthand. Nothing that I hear from the directors or principals surprises me, but we need training to be able to understand what that means. We've had some difficult conversations with the former principal of PDSD that was not supported. So that's one of the ways that we'll support that. I've also built into that plan director and principal PD. They should identify, as well as my office as well, training at least a minimum of 18 hours, more preferably. They have to get out and develop themselves. They have to get out and tour schools. They have to get out and evaluate programs and pick things apart. Again, I know that firsthand. Educational improvement, it's one-on-one. You have to do it. We also, one of the asks that they ask is we meet one-on-one. They respect and love to have one-on-one meetings monthly. When I came on the agency, they were happening weekly. They felt a little bubble wrapped. And so we have a pretty awesome communication structure set up. We also talked about a GAM, a General Administrators meeting that would kick off about 3 times a year. This also serves to as a source to communicate what we're doing in the agency across the board. It serves to keep us focused. It serves to keep us going in that direction once we lay this foundation. The problem is that we do not have a foundation to support what our kids deserve. So we also talked about a retreat for educational leaders. I'm a firm believer in teaming and retreat and supporting them in more ways than one. Some of the feedback that also came out of this, there were some other things but they wanted education to be the focus and the heart of the agency, to drive the agency, to drive the things that we need to do for our students, what's happening in the classroom. There's somewhat of an imbalance of how this works currently, and the education component kind of takes a back seat. I see that. I'm a true blue educator. I've done it for 23 years. So that's where my heart lies with educators and what they do. This is not limited. There is a chart we put together of how this would fall throughout the year. So this is just for us collecting that survey, having a workshop, and getting some things together. So when former board member Jance asked that question, in addition to the principals, I mean, they have the principal coach, but there's a lot that goes into supporting leaders. And what we're doing right now is makes no sense. It's reactive. And they're fighting a really tough fight. So my hat's off to them. So that was an ask that I put together. I would be happy to email that chart out to you of how we would support those leaders, how we would support the foundation of ASDB and the education. The goal, I think, from all of the leaders is they all wanted this picture to change. No one believed that our students could not achieve. And that's certainly my belief in principle. All people have the capacity to learn. It's just the way in which they learn that we have to figure out. That's our job as educators. So they share that belief, but there's also a lot of other things that we will put into there and continue to meet to build that support structure. Thank you to Board Member Jance for that ask, former Board Member Jance. It is a complicated picture, but we have picked it apart. So thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Assistant Superintendent Martin? Moving on then to 1.05, Assistant Superintendent of Agency Operations and Support Services Report. Assistant Superintendent Cooper.
Good afternoon, Board President Kneifel, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Martin, members of the board, ASDB community, and staff members. As the Agency Operations and Support Services Departments collaborate more with the educational program and work through addressing their educational priorities and needs for our students, we continue to work on addressing...
This is not a valid menu option.
We are continuing to improve the agency's organizational culture and identify effective resource management strategies, which aligns with the agency's strategic plan. The team is very busy supporting each of the educational programs with planning the needs for the end of the school year. We're also working on completing various other projects, which consist of standardizing annual hours for our 10-month staff members, restructuring the compensation and salary schedules for grades 10 and above, aligning student counts with staffing needs, and doing a deeper dive into the cost per student by disability categories. We're still working on transitional changes and filling staff vacancies that occurred as a result of the agency-wide administrative support realignment, where we did centralize various positions within the business services, operations, and HR departments, but we also developed a more formalized staffing structure for all of our directors and principals. Speaking of staff vacancies, we just completed our first 2 agency-wide career fairs, which were held on the Phoenix and Tucson campuses. So thank you to all the departments that played active roles in organizing and making both of those events successful. We've gotten a couple of new ASDB hires to fill some of those vacant staff positions throughout the agency. And as you can see through the business services report, we still have a number of vacancies to fill. So that not only addresses recruitment, but we also need to be able to focus on retention as well of our staff members. We have been given the green light to continue to move forward with the new student information system implementation with Synergy. We will be hosting the student information system on our Azure cloud via a virtual server instead of this actually being done by EduPoint. Because of this change, we have had to do a contract amendment with the State Procurement Office, and we are working on finalizing the project investment justification with the State Department of Administration. So kudos to business services, IT, and all those departments that are working through that new structure as we implement a new student information system for the agency. Last but not least, I am asking assistance from each of you board members, and that is for at least 2 of you to at least volunteer to be on the Finance Committee. The only remaining member right now is Mike Gordon, so we need to fill 2 spots recently vacated by Aaron Wanders and PV Chance. So feel free to let Superintendent Reichman or myself know if you are interested. So that's at least 2 volunteers we're looking for. So at this time, there are no other updates, and I'm open to answer any questions or respond to any comments that you may have at this time.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Thank you very much. Moving on to 2.01, the consent agenda items. Before we move ahead with a motion, I would like to pull policies BCB and LB from 7.06 and discuss them separately from the consent agenda.
Linda has her hand up as well. This is Board Member Bove. I would also like to pull 7.06 from the consent agenda.
The whole thing?
The whole thing, yes.
Okay. All right. Any other?
That's all from me.
I would like to pull item 6.16.
Okay. So then, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda item, including 3.01, 5.01, 6.01, 6.02, 6.03, 6.04, 6.05, 6.06, 6.07, 6.08, 6.09, 6.10, 6.11, 6.12, 6.13, 6.14, 6.15, 6.17, and 7.07.
I so move.
And
Good job, CK.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Is Gordon there?
Mike, are you there?
I am. I approve.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 3.02, approval of new district agreements. Assistant to Superintendent Martin.
Board President, we have a contract for Hermosa, Montessori Charter, and Region 3 for approval.
Yeah, I move to approve the new contract.
A second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay. 4.01, Finance Report with Kimberly Bittrich of the Director of Business Services.
Good afternoon, Board President Kneifel, Assistant Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendents Cooper and Martin, members of the board, ASDB community, and staff. Our most recent Finance Committee meeting was held last Thursday, February 23rd, with Board Member Mike Gordon. Also in attendance were Superintendent Reichman and Assistant Superintendent Cooper. We also discussed the December 2022 and 2021 financial reports, the January 2023 and 22 budget to actual reports. The financial reports are also provided to you in a more condensed version. The total student count for February 1st, 2023 is 2,119, a decrease of 59 students when compared to February 1st, 2022. Total count of 2178. The site-based student count has remained the same. However, there were decreases of 21 in the cooperatives, 23 in preschool, and 15 in the birth to 3 programs. As of February 1st, we had 468 FTE, which includes 8.5 FTE at PC. At that time, we employed 707 employees. Only 135 are full-time, with a 1.0 FTE. There were currently 167 vacancies agency-wide. The highlight of the January 23 financial report shows the revenue of $30.6 million was $1.6 million higher than January 2022. Revenue of $29 million. The major difference is the increased use of the general funds year to date. We have already spent $900,000 of the $1.1 million appropriated for transportation. The budget fiscal year 23 obligated expenditures of $37.3 million were $3.5 million higher than budget fiscal year 2022 of $33.8. The increases are in salaries, contracted services, including transportation, FBC, one-to-one nurses, and repair and maintenance for the fleet. The $350,000 transfer is to ADOA for budget fiscal year 23 for food service equipment improvements at both Tucson and Phoenix campuses. The program increases are $800,000 at PDSD, $500,000 at Tucson, and $1.1 million in the administration and statewide services. In addition to the expenses mentioned earlier, the blind programs were moved from the Tucson campus to the administration and statewide services. The second quarter financial reports reflect an increase in cash on the deposit with the state treasurer of $4.9 million. The major difference is an increase of the Prop 301 funds of $2.3 million and the cooperative service funds of $2.4 million. This concludes my report of the financial status, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6.16, intent not to offer fiscal year 2024 employment contract to George Martin.
This is Lynn. I would like to have a little discussion. I believe I've talked to a number of staff members who have been very positive about George's performance, and these are some of the upper level staff members. I also feel that this is a big agency. He had a lot to learn and was told in December that he would not be offered a contract. I think there's a lot to learn about. We gave Annette time to learn the agency, and I think, given the parameters, what the goals are, what the expectations are, I'd like to see how he can grow and how he can pull the agency forward, especially with the background he has.
Thank you, Lynn. Does anybody have any additional comments? Go ahead.
Yes. I would like to ask Superintendent Reichman her perspective of George Martin's performance as assistant superintendent. I'd like to understand her perspective and why you're not recommending the renewal of his contract.
When Assistant Superintendent George Martin started at the end of June, I had high hopes. I thought he was a good choice, and I recognized that it would take time for him to learn about the agency and about our system and about deaf and blind education. I also knew that he had a lot of experience in general education that he would be bringing to us. But then in mid-semester in the fall, we had a series of crises, starting with the principal of PTSD resigning, essentially quitting and not able to continue her work. So immediately we had to find a replacement by promoting the assistant principal to principal. We then had the November 4th situation, which just blew up, and we were head in needing to address that. It took me about 6 weeks, and that's all I did in those 6 weeks was address that blow up related to the student and the teacher. So it wasn't until December where I began to think the rest of the year through. So mid-year review at that time was held in December. It was a time for me to look at our leadership team and to see their work and to review their SMART goals and what they have done so far. And that is when I finally began to realize, yes, George is new. He does have a lot to learn. There were many different little things that have occurred. So if you add them all up and you actually see a pattern, there are different kinds of issues, but they all are tied together. And I have the sense that he does not have a sense of urgency. So that is what I had communicated with him in December. After that, again, after full consideration, and going back to all of the meetings that we had on a weekly basis, I had agendas, I had items to review, I pulled them all, I put them all together, and I reviewed all of the documents that I had from these meetings. And I pulled out major themes. There were 4 outlying themes. First is failure to lead. Second, failure to identify risks to the agency. Third, failure to properly communicate. And fourth, failure to give support to his leadership team. Those were the 4 themes. I can give you specific examples. I have an 8-page synopsis of the work that we did and the time and the consideration in reviewing all the documents that I have compiled together. I've actually never done this before, to be honest. I've never had to, in my years, I want to say since 1985, in the years that I have been a supervisor of so many individuals over the years, I have never done a deep review before. Because this is such an important decision for the agency.
This is Board Member Bove. Thank you so much for that information, Annette. I do have full confidence in your judgment and your assessment, your ability to fairly evaluate an individual and see that full picture. I'm not there on a daily basis to see what's going on, but I do have confidence in your decision-making and your recommendation not to renew. So I will give my support to your decision to not renew his contract. so that we can move forward, move onward to uplift and continue to improve our agency at the leadership level. And you, as superintendent, need to be able to do that rather than be distracted by those incidents that come up on a daily basis. Your attention should not be diverted to things like that. We need to leave you free to run the agency. So, can I make a motion? Okay. This is Board Member Bove. I move that we do not renew Assistant Superintendent Martin's contract for the next school year.
I will second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Mike?
Nay. Nay.
Motion carries. We move down to agenda item 7.01, the Ombudsman report.
Good evening, Board President Neifel, board members, Superintendent Reichman, and Assistant Superintendents Cooper and Martin. ASDB family and community, I am honored to be here presenting the very first Ombudsman report. It's hard to believe I've been here since July, but that is the truth. I have been here since July. And so I just wanted to call your attention to some of the activities that the ombudsperson has been engaged in since that time. I mean, obviously the first several weeks of my time here, I really spent time getting to know the agency and its leadership team, and really getting a sense of where I would fit in terms of my role and what some of the needs were. I also had to kind of fill in the structure of the office, complete with our mission and all the documents and things that we would need for people to use to access the service. And so there was a lot of kind of researching that was happening, and a lot of creating of things that I would use in this role in that time period. But once I kind of got up and running and started actually engaging members of the ASDB community, I'm going to share with you just kind of in the aggregate what I've been seeing and the work that I've been doing. So to access the services, well, first of all, we created a website page. I know the community is not aware. I heard comments about that. There is actually a full page on the ASDB website about the ombudsperson, and also the form that you can fill out to access the services. So we wanted to be able to have a way of capturing kind of usage, and so that's one of the ways that we're able to do that. So users are directed to fill out the form when seeking ombudsman services, and that form really captures information for me, not only to give me a sense of kind of what the needs are, but also so that I can report back to the superintendent and the board as to what the usage is. So we capture name, title, we capture just minor details about the concern, and then I'm able to reach back out to those individuals and then set up a time for us to take a deeper dive into what those needs are. And so from the time period of July of last year to December of last year, that 6-month period, I probably had, and there was probably a time where there were people who reached out to me who didn't fill out the form, probably because it wasn't fully operational at that time, so I wasn't able to capture everything. But for the most part, the 20 users during that time period, I'll just give you a breakdown of kind of who they were. So of those 20 requests that I recorded through that process, 18 or 90% were staff, ASDB staff, 5% or 1 was from admin, and then I also had a parent contact me during that time. So of those individuals, most people were reaching out to me about interpersonal conflict. That's not terribly surprising. I've been a mediator for 20 years, and generally when people come to see me, it's some interpersonal issue that they're having with another individual, so that wasn't terribly surprising at all. 3 of those individuals wanted to hear more about the formal complaint process or were either in the formal complaint process pursuant to ASDB policy. A couple of those individuals had procedural concerns. And actually, there's been more individuals that had questions about process and procedure, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Informal complaints as well. Hey, I'm having a problem with my supervisor, dynamic issues like that. And then policy concerns. And then the 7 other requests I'll talk about in a minute. So the 7 other issues are really about, I would say, it covered the gamut, really. But if I could summarize it, it was scheduling issues. So it was kind of like how work is distributed, how much work is distributed, those kinds of questions. Personal safety issues, unfair treatment issues, and things of that nature. A small number of those requests were people who were like recurring users who had a preliminary conversation with me. We developed some strategies and some next steps, and then they engaged in those next steps, and they came back and said, reporting on how that went, if it went well or if it didn't go well, and then we talked again about what they could do next. And so my approach has always been not necessarily resolution, because my role here is much greater than that, but really being helpful, number one, being an ear for people, which I think is helpful, and also getting people to the next step of where they're trying to go. So they're here, and they're trying to get here. How do I get them there? And I do that by listening to them, and then by letting them know what ASDB policy has to say about that. And if they're not familiar with it, I will share that with them, and then I'll send them a copy of it so that they're aware as well. And so my goal is always that people leave the ombudsperson's office better than when they arrived. That's always been my overarching goal. So regarding the people that didn't fill out a form, there's also an ombudsperson email address, and people do use that as well. And sometimes they're able to just ask that question, and then I can answer the question. So it's fairly routine to do that, and that happens, several times in the week. And so I was able to capture some of that information as well, but it didn't really result in a consultation or an appointment outside of that email exchange. And so I just wanted you to be aware that that is happening. Those kinds of interactions are happening as well. In terms of current projects, it's already been alluded to about the focus groups. Just based on what I've been hearing and some of the subject matters, I wanted to have a greater understanding, because I have a small subset, obviously, of ASDB people. So I wanted to have a greater understanding of kind of the climate. And so I took a look at the employee satisfaction survey, which was administered before I was an employee here at ASDB. But, it was very insightful, right? And there were several buckets that I thought that the comments fell into. And certainly one of those overarching buckets was communication. We've heard that a lot this evening. And so I recognize that as well, even in the small subset of folks that have used the ombudsperson services. So what I thought was focus groups would be a great idea to kind of take a deeper dive into what that really means. I don't know that employee satisfaction surveys really get at what people are really talking about when they say they're not being communicated to or communication is not effective. I mean, that's such a huge topic that there's always a need to drill down deeper. And focus groups allow us to do that. So I made that proposal to the superintendent, and she agreed that that would be a great idea to really get some actionable things that we can do in communication, something that an employee satisfaction survey doesn't necessarily reveal. So in the coming weeks, we're going to put out information about how to be a part of the focus groups. We've got our questions already set out, and we've got our groups. I got some more suggestions to add to those groups, and I will discuss that with the superintendent. But we're going to move forward, and I hope that there is some interest in participating, because I think that there's a need for people to have a different environment other than a survey to express their concerns. So I look forward to engaging the community around creating a more effective communications at the agency. So overall, in that period of time, I logged in over 200 hours establishing the office and protocols, as well as addressing the needs that came my way. I think the volume and tenor of work was what I expected, but I also think that it will increase over time. Obviously, this is a very public explanation of what I do, and so as people become more aware, I think that the usage will also increase as well. So for now, I'm collecting data to report out every 6 months, but if the usage increases, maybe that becomes quarterly, maybe it becomes monthly, but I think right now, twice a year will probably be sufficient for the work that I've done thus far. So that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Yes, hi, this is Linda Bove. Hello, Ms. Williams.
Hello.
I am thrilled to know that you have this plan in place to implement these focus groups. I am often approached by various members of the community because, as a board member, I am a representative of the community. And there are a lot of things that I am being asked to address, lots of different directions that I'm being pulled in. So I'm very happy to see that you're establishing these focus groups, and I do want to see the community involved in that. I'm looking at the pillars of our strategic plan, and it says excellence in communication and relationships. In my life, growing up as a deaf person, communication has always been an issue. Unfortunately, communication between the deaf and hearing communities has been challenging, and I suppose that's life. But I would love to see ASDB make the best of that situation by bringing those groups together, helping us to avoid misunderstandings that often occur in miscommunication. We really need to drill down into, like you said, what communication means. Let's get to the heart of where those problems are. And I think that those focus groups will really help you and the agency to see where those issues are much more clearly. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing the participation. Also, under priority 3, it says engage the community under excellence in communication. So I would love to see improved community engagement. And I look forward to seeing you over the next few months and see what you're able to bring to the board.
Thank you.
Looking forward to learning more.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. And noticing the time, we're going to take a 10-minute break to allow the interpreters and our CART reporter some downtime. We will resume at 5:45.
Let me see if we can get started. It's 5:46 now. Do we want to get started pretty soon? Can I please get someone to interpret to the audience? I'm unmuting microphones now.
Okay. We are back in session, and we are moving on to 7.02, an information item, the legislative update. Maria Murphy, Director of Policy and Government Relations.
Good afternoon, Acting President Kneifel, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, and Assistant Superintendents and members of the audience. So, members of the board, you have before you my abstract on the legislative update. The first bill that I would like to discuss is House Bill 2642. As you are all aware, this bill was introduced as part of our request to update the transportation and capital outlay amounts that are within the institutional voucher on Arizona Revised Statutes Title 15. It was sponsored by Representative Cook. He's a very strong advocate, very vocal on behalf of ASDB, but unfortunately, the bill did not receive a committee hearing in the Education Committee. However, we're not completely out of the game. Governor Hobbs did actually propose our funding request in the amount of one-time funding for education for next year's state budget. So what the plan is right now is for me to continue to advocate on behalf of the funding and go to individual members of the legislature, talk to them about the importance of this funding request and that it is important that it not just be funded one time, that we receive ongoing funding because we know the need for buses is not going to go away. We know the need for building repairs is not going to go away. So what I will be doing is handing everybody information packets and asking each individual member of the legislature to please place this on their list of budget priorities when it comes time in May and June to start negotiating the state budget. So we will see how that goes. The next bill that I would like to brief you on is House Bill 2456. This is our continuation bill. Colloquially, it's known as our Sunrise Bill. And I actually have updates to offer even since I gave this abstract to Leticia last week. So the bill did pass out of the House unanimously. It was transmitted to the Senate. That having been said, it did receive a first read on Monday, and it was assigned to a committee. However, it was not assigned where we expected it to go. We had anticipated that it was going to go to the Senate Education Committee. Instead, it was assigned to the Senate Government Committee. It appears that ASDB is the only agency who received an assignment to the Government Committee. So this is a little bit unusual, and I am trying to run down some additional information as to why it was placed in government instead of Senate Education. So we are prepared to continue to advocate so that ASDB can have their statute renewed for another 8 years. So at this time, does anybody have any questions for me about those two bills?
Yes, Maria, my question is the same for both of them. What can the board do? What can the community do to support you in these efforts at this time?
So thank you, Board Member Kneifel. That's an excellent question. So what I would always recommend is sending letters and making phone calls or even requesting meetings with your local legislators. So find your state senator, find your state representatives, and continue to advocate for
this funding issue and for ASDB's continuation. So you can find your legislator online at www.azledge.gov. If you need the specific link, please feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to figure out who your local legislator is, and just get in there and advocate. And when the continuation bill comes before the committee for a hearing, we would love to see a really robust turnout in favor of a clean bill, meaning to pass it as it's written.
As it's written.
Not with any amendments.
Okay, and you will keep us up to date on that?
I commit to keeping you all up to date because the updates happen sometimes on not just a day-by-day basis, but it happens on a minute-by-minute basis. So there have been updates just between yesterday and today, and I just received an update here in my chair about an hour ago.
And are these updates also posted on the website?
On the ASDB website or on the AZ Ledge website?
On the ASDB website.
No, we are not currently posting it on the ASDB website. We do have to be a little bit careful about the use of state resources and state time to engage in advocacy activities. At this time, I am the designated public lobbyist for ASDB, and then Annette, as the superintendent of ASDB, also has the ability to advocate. But if parents, the community, students, and staff would like to advocate on behalf of this funding issue and on behalf of bills, then it is something that they would need to make sure that they are doing on their own time and using their own resources. So, of course, we encourage everybody to participate in the legislative process. Everybody has a voice. But in particular for our staff, we do have to be mindful that we're not expending public resources on advocacy activities.
Thank you for that clarification. Does anyone else have any questions for her on those two?
Yes. I have a question about azleg.gov. I believe you have to register to comment in person
Operator help
at the Capitol.
requested.
Is that still true? Some folks have wanted to, they thought it was easy to register to speak online, but rather you have to go down to the Capitol and they have a kiosk or some sort of system that you have to register to. And then after that, you can then register to speak from your computer. So that is something to keep in mind for our community, especially. When we're talking about I get confused, sunset, sunrise, whatever that one is called, the sunrise bill, rather, that you were just talking about. The Education Committee has historically always been the committee for us, but now being transferred to this government committee, I'm very interested in knowing why, because we've been renewed for several different iterations, and yet now we're being moved over. I'm very interested into finding out why. What information have you been able to gather?
So I was able to speak to our prime sponsor's assistant earlier this afternoon, and when I asked as to why, we were told that the Government Committee and the Education Committee are both large committees, and because ASDB is a state agency and there was agency language in the bill, that it could be assigned over to the Government Committee. What I find interesting about that is that there are other state agencies, boards, and commissions that are also going through the continuation process this legislative session, and none of those agencies thus far have been assigned to the Government Committee. So that is unusual to me, and it is somewhat concerning to me. So I am going to continue to keep a very close eye on the situation, and I am in touch with Senate staff. I'm in touch with senators themselves to try and figure out what exactly is going on so that we can come up with an effective strategy when the bill comes up for a hearing.
Okay. Question on your point of view. Are we likely to get more support from the Education Committee or the Government Committee? Like you said, this is odd, and you have concerns. Are we less likely to get support from one of the other? I don't have a pulse on that myself.
I cannot speak specifically to the Government Committee, but I can speak to the Education Committee because I know everybody on the Education Committee, and I've met with them and worked with them off and on for years, and I do feel confident that we would have had a warm reception at the Education Committee. I am not as certain with the Government Committee just because I have not had the opportunity to interact with them as frequently, so it's a little bit difficult to predict.
Okay. I want to make sure that we don't get any surprises like 1402.
Yes, and
that was a bomb that was dropped on us.
yes, and
How can we be prepared?
Yes, and that is my concern as well, which is part of the reason why I am encouraging the community, students, anybody who would be interested in taking part in the legislative process to please participate. And you can participate by sending emails, making phone calls, coming down to the Capitol to be heard at a committee meeting. So you did ask about having to go down to the Capitol and signing into kiosks. And Board Member Bove, what you're referring to is something called the Request to Speak system. So the very first time that you want to log into the Request to Speak system, that is something where you have to create that account at the kiosk at the Capitol. Once you have created that account at the Capitol, then any member of the public has the ability to go ahead and file what's called a position of opposing, supporting, or neutral on any particular bill. And you can also include comments in that as well. If you believe that you would like to actually come down and speak in front of the committee, you would have the ability to request that as well using the online system, the Request to Speak system.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions regarding those two?
Yeah, this is Mike. I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, Maria.
Hi, Mike.
I have a question. Just there's a certain level of ambiguity around 1402 when it came to public comments, particularly when it was the Education Committee, because I know that seemingly as an official position, ASDB was neutral, and I don't think I saw other people who were in support or certainly who were against the bill. And I think from my position, I didn't quite know how to respond, if it was a board position or an ASD position of neutrality and maybe you mentioned this before, maybe it was, and I apologize if it's redundancy, but can you explain that a little bit to me, please?
Yes, definitely. It's an excellent question. As Annette previously mentioned, we had no idea that this strike everything amendment was coming. We found out about it at 5 o'clock on a Monday afternoon for a 2 o'clock Wednesday hearing. And we were in a mad scramble to try to first get in with the bill's sponsor to try to figure out what was her intention in introducing this language, and then trying to tease out some of the potential consequences of this bill. Because everything happened so quickly, I, as the government relations director, really do not have the authority to take an official position about an ASDB bill until the ASDB board tells me what I can and cannot do. So when I went up there on Wednesday to testify, what I did was I explained that we filed neutral simply because the ASDB board has not given me the authority to go ahead and file a support or oppose position. Having said that, I did note that there were a lot of potential unintended consequences of this bill. And even now, 2 weeks later, we are still teasing out consequences that we had not even thought of from 2 weeks ago. And what I can tell you, and what I feel confident in telling the board, is that we know that the blind community, NFB, is opposed to this. We know that the deaf community, in terms of AZAD and NAD, is opposed to this. My counterparts in the general special education community have serious concerns. The Arizona Department of Education has some serious concerns. And then even as recently as day before yesterday, we found out that the University of Arizona has concerns because this could potentially affect some of their students who are trying to get certificated through the intern certificate program. So there's a lot of people who are extremely concerned. And I have been trying to work with legislators on an individual basis to say, guys, this bill is not quite ready for prime time. This bill needs a lot of additional work if it even passes. And I did also reach out to Senator Wadsack and say, Senator Wadsack, we're willing to talk to you. We want to continue to have these discussions with you because I agree with Senator Wadsack that funding of special education in this state is abysmal. It's underfunded. And I agree that we need to be doing more for special education students in the state of Arizona. Where we differ, with great respect, is whether this bill is the vehicle to go about addressing her concerns. I personally do not believe that this is the appropriate vehicle to address her concerns. But until you, ASDB board, give Superintendent Reichman and myself the authority to go say, no, we're opposed, I have to work a little bit more behind the scenes in a one-on-one. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it certainly answers my question. A follow-up, okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. The caveats associated with this would take a year to implement at the very least, and even then would be very difficult. But nonetheless, what is current right now, though? Didn't something come out today around another hearing next week that I don't know if the bill is going to individual senators or, I'm not really privy to this kind of to the process, but is there something that's particularly current right now that was different than what occurred at the education hearing and then the one on the following Wednesday?
So I am not aware of any other bill that has come up. I hope there's no bill that's come up right now. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go and take a look. But 1402.
I'm associated with it.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm talking over you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So Senate Bill 1402 did pass out of the Rules Committee last week as being considered constitutional and in proper form. And typically the next step for a bill like that, after it is passed out of committee and after it is passed out of rules, is for it to be placed on the consent calendar. If it is pulled off of the consent calendar, it would go to something called Committee of the Whole. And Committee of the Whole is basically where the entire floor, the entire Senate, would debate the merits and drawbacks of the bill. I have been watching the Senate agendas, the Committee of the Whole agendas, like a hawk since it passed out of rules. The Committee of the Whole has not placed 1402 on its calendar. They have adjourned for the rest of the week So now the earliest that it would be able to come back and be considered on the calendar would be this Monday.
Okay.
Linda, before you, Brittany had her hand up as well.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, let me process for 1 second. Obviously, Maria, we are concerned about 1402. How concerned should we be about 2456? And how concerned should the community be about 2456?
I'm concerned.
About 2456?
About 2456. I do not want to panic as of yet because there's just still a lot of unknowns.
Is there anything that you can clarify, since we do have a lot of the public here that has already spoken about 1402, is there anything you can share about 2456 with maybe the public to make the, so that maybe they can understand why you and we would be highly concerned about something as benign seeming as our Sunrise Sunset bill?
Well, the reason that I would be highly concerned is because if the Senate does not pass this bill, or if they do not hear the bill in committee, then the bill will not pass. It will not go to the governor's office, and then technically ASDB would sunset, meaning that we would roll up the sidewalks and all go home. It would be the end of ASDB in its current form. But it's very premature. I don't want to cause a panic, but I do want the community, the board, and everybody to be aware that this is happening and we need to be watching and we need to be highly involved with the legislature so that they understand the importance of the work that ASDB does and that it is absolutely critical that our charter essentially be renewed for another 8 years.
Thank you, Maria.
You're welcome.
Linda?
This is Linda. I have a question for ADE. Speaking of, again, 1402, I am curious because when we're looking at children with disabilities other than deafness, blindness, visual impairment, etc., are there existing programs, organizations, schools that provide services and meet the needs of children with other disabilities under ADE? And just this is more for informational purposes so the community's aware.
Yes. There are other private schools specifically for other disabilities.
Colette, those are private.
How many roughly, sorry, Lynn, how many roughly would you say? Programs, schools, 50, 100? Like, what are we looking at statewide?
You know, I don't have that information, but I could get
96.
It to you. Oh, there's 96?
96.
Okay.
96. 96.
The difference is they're private.
Yes. They're also, I'm sorry.
All of them are private?
They are, children are placed by their IEP team in the private school.
And the school districts pay for that
Yes,
placement.
and the school districts pay for that placement, correct.
Okay. Okay, and I just want to make sure that we're all clear on that there are other programs that are meeting that need. And to co-opt ASDB to provide those services just doesn't make sense to me when they're already being provided. And so now that you have confirmed for us that there are multiple programs, like Lynn said, that districts are supporting, there are services available. And it would be wonderful if we could be left alone to focus on serving deaf, hard of hearing, blind, visually impaired, deaf-blind students as a top priority in our school system. Our, quote, sensory impaired children. That is what we do here. Thank you for that information, Colette.
You're welcome.
Lynn, did you have anything you wanted to? Okay. What do you need from us now?
I would absolutely love it if somebody would make a motion to allow me to file an official position.
I got you. I would love to have the honor of moving that the board oppose Bill 1402 and direct the school to do the same.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you.
Here's my.
Okay, this is Mike. Could I ask Maria one more question, please?
Of course you may.
Maria, is it possible for Senator Wadsack to include 1402 into 2456?
Yes, it is.
What did he ask?
If
I'm
they
sorry.
could amend 2456.
Yes, theoretically it is possible, and that is a concern.
I think that's what I was referring to before.
This is Board Member Bove. Can you explain a little bit more of how that could happen? Give us an example. I'm seeing and hearing some chatter out in the audience as well. So, what are we saying that could look like, Maria, so that we know what to keep an eye out for?
So theoretically, it is possible for a senator to file an amendment to amend 2456. And theoretically, it is possible that it could include the language of 1402. So yes, theoretically, it is possible, and that is a concern.
Maria, as part of your discussion for 2456 with the legislators, is it ASDB's position that passed cleanly without amendment?
I would like to take that position, yes, especially since the board has already taken the position that we would be opposed to the language in 1402. Then I think it would be a logical extension to say that we would be opposed to any amending, and that it would be our preference, our strong preference, to see a clean bill. Clean being unamended, passed as it's being presented.
And then with 1402, that it is not supported and not passed.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead, Brittany.
So to kind of just, so I can recap really quick, what you're saying currently is even though we oppose 1402, the senator can choose to add 1402 to our Sunrise bill and hinge the longevity of our school on if we will include 1402. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And we are, but we don't know that that's going to happen.
True. Very true. But we are concerned.
But we are concerned. And I am actively investigating other avenues to make sure that our Sunrise bill passes cleanly.
So you would need us as the board to do a motion to support 2456 in its original form. Is that correct?
I am actually not certain if because you have already approved 2456 at the January board meeting in that form. So I don't know if we would need a second motion for that.
I just really want to ensure that 2456 stays in its original form, and that is our position.
And you authorized me to take a position on that, and you authorized me to do that in January. And so my position is that the board authorized me to take a for position, and the board's position on the language of that bill has not changed.
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
That's how I interpret it, so.
Any other questions, comments for Maria? We're going to move on to 7.04, the discussion and possible action request to state legislator to adjust Group B weights for students with disabilities. I'm going to guess, Maria, that that has something also to do with you.
Yes. So actually, former board member Nigro requested that this item originally be placed on the agenda, but it actually dovetails very nicely with the discussion that we've already been having.
Okay.
You have the abstract before you, and you also received a copy of the ADE cost study that was commissioned last year. And in conclusion with that cost study, we're seeing that current special education funding, it's just not sufficient to address the actual student needs. So special education students, on average, are underfunded by about $5,600 per child per year. So what board member Nigro wanted to do was to just highlight that for the ASDB board to say this is not just an issue for, you know, deaf, blind, low vision, hard of hearing children. This is an issue statewide. Mm-hmm. And again, this dovetails with what I think Senator Wadsack is, with the point that she's trying to get across, is that special education funding is not adequate, and that more needs to be done for special education students in the state of Arizona. So that's something that we can agree on. So that is why former board president Nigro wanted this brought to the attention of the ASDB board.
At this time, is there any action you need us to take on that as a board?
Not at this time, Board President Kneifel, simply because of the fact that there's not an active bill out there right now that is specifically addressing the Group B funding. But if there is a bill that starts moving through the legislature that specifically addresses Group B funding, for instance, like the budget bills or something of that nature, then it would be good if we could just go ahead and file a position, because we should be filing a position to support our counterparts in school districts and charters, because they support us, so we should be supporting them.
I'm not sure if that answered my question. Part of me feels like if we would motion to allow you to take a position in support of increasing or adjusting Group B weights for students with disabilities statewide, that would give you the latitude if you should see a budget bill or something to that effect surface.
Yes, it would give me latitude, and it would give me authority to take a position. And I informally take positions when people ask me, but if you want me to actually file an official position, testify at a committee hearing or something like that, it would be better if I had the board's authority.
I so move that. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none?
Aye. Oh,
One opposition. Motion still carries. Moving on to, I believe we are now on to 7.05. Introduction and possible discussion of policies A to Z.
Yes. So, board members, you have before you the policies which are being brought up for introduction and possible discussion. What I can tell you is that these policies are being brought forth in response to the report from the Auditor General. The recommendations were made in regards to our complaint policies that we needed to have timelines associated with those policies so that we were responding in a relatively timely manner. And that is essentially what these policies are doing. These are our complaint policies. And
the change that is being made is we are adding on a timeline to respond by.
Maria, in regards to the comments we heard, for example, on JII and I believe it was KEB, is it possible to add language to make sure that parents and or guardians are kept into that communication loop?
Absolutely. If that is the sense of the board, then certainly I'm happy to do that.
Yes.
Please move in that direction.
Okay.
Thank you. Moving on to 7.06, which was pulled from the consent agenda, I would like to take this policy by policy and vote on them separately. Starting with policy BCB, which is the conflict of interest policy. I did not print it, but I did submit some recommendations for amendment to this policy to include the board members are supposed to be signing a conflict of interest statement upon their appointment, but I think that it should be reviewed on an annual basis to make sure that it's current, as well as moving out. Go ahead.
If I could, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm in support, though, of what you just said, because I serve on other school boards, and I have to sign that contract on an annual basis to make sure that you're doing that self-reflection to make sure that there is no conflict.
The second part of that is I would like to see the language about spouses serving on the board mirror the dependent language. And that because this is a very small community that we serve, and we are, for lack of a better word, cutting off our nose to spite our face by eliminating any potential good board candidates. So I would like to see that language altered so that we can consider that with governor appointment and board approval.
My only concern with that is that board member would have to abstain from a lot of the voting that had to do with staff, and that we would not have a full board vote on some of the items that come up.
And historically, we have had folks abstain from those types of things, and
but I still feel it's better if we can have a full board vote rather than 2 or 3 people can't vote on any staff.
Right. This is
That's
board member
just my
Bo.
opinion.
I understand your opinion, but like Dr. Harvey Goodstein had mentioned, and also PV, and I have seen for my own self, the people from the deaf community who are qualified to serve on the board are often the same people who have worked at the schools. We know best where to draw the line. We are professionals, and we've become accustomed to drawing those lines. For example, like Dr. Goodstein said, he taught math at Gallaudet University while his wife was working within another department of the university. And today, we see all these PhD doctor and doctor spousals, but they're working at the same university because the community is quite small. But we value those people with expertise in this field. So I think with that conflict of interest on an annual basis being required, we simply don't have the plethora of candidates like a hearing board would have. When it comes to the governor's office or appointments for other boards or even running for your local school board, there's a lot of different candidates that people can choose from. But when it comes to representation from our community, we shouldn't limit ourselves. And so that's why I would like to see that language changed so that instead of prohibiting any sort of working relationships, that we maintain professional boundaries. I'm a member of the community, But it's not that I can't represent the community while I'm here on the board. I am a representative of the community, and in that, I have to be a member of the community in order to gain their ideas. So we have a lot of mature and smart people who can know where those boundaries lie and know how to cross them if necessary or when not to. So that's why I would like that language changed. You can always recuse. Yep. You can always recuse or abstain.
So in regards to BCB, are there any further comments or questions?
BCB.
This is Mike.
Yes, Mike.
I think, particularly, I mean, I understand in the blind community, it's important to have the most qualified people in positions. But this is more than just people working together in a university or at an agency. This is in a governing role and making decisions at times that can affect their spouses and or family members. I'm not opposed to a change on this, but we just heard the word recuse. It's a lot more than abstaining. A person would have to automatically recuse themselves to be in any discussion or decision making, particularly when it comes to salaries or authority issues. So it's a lot more involved than just professional boundaries. And I do understand the necessity to have good people in positions and how small the labor force is. So I can support a change, but I also want to recognize not just a casual thing that you can just have good reasoning.
And Mike, this is UK. I agree with you, which is why my amendment included that it would not only be by governor appointment, but it would have to come in front of the board for final approval before they were accepted. Knowing that conflict, because even though the governor's office may be aware of that conflict, they may not understand it in the context of being on this board.
Thank you.
Any?
Maria.
So,
Maria.
I would just also like to, a member of the audience just pointed out to me that the language in the policy regarding spouses, that is something that does apply. That language is pinned on Arizona Revised Statute that is for school districts. We are a state agency who also happens to be a local educational agency, so there is no statutory impediment that would prevent us from taking this out. So, but I do understand the conversation that the board is having on making sure that the board is setting the appropriate guardrails.
So Maria all right, so I'm going to do it this way. I'd like to move that policy BCB be revised and brought before the board again with potential changes. And don't just, you guys all send in your comments as well for Maria to make sure that she's getting the essence of what needs to be in place as far as governing that. So let me go back and say, I move that we not pass BCB as it currently is written and have it revised and brought back to the board for evaluation after the amendment is made or the language is changed.
To make sure that we are within statutory.
Correct. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, BCB is not passed. It's tabled. Moving on to GBEAA. I did not pull this one, so I'm going to ask Linda to bring her, start maybe with her concerns.
Yes. This is Board Member Bove. I did want to pull this, like you mentioned, Sue Kay. I would like to go through each of them. BAA is one that I wanted to address.
GBEA.
Hang on, it's not there. It was actually on, it was on the agenda 2 meetings ago. No, BAA is one that I wanted to address. It was on a previous agenda, and let me give you a little bit of background. This policy was established a while back, and it states the board, hold on, please.
Oh, Linda, can I interrupt you really quickly? If it is not one of the policies that are on the agenda, we need to agendize it and be able to talk about it at the next meeting.
Okay. Okay.
So right now, we're looking at GBEAA, but remind me at the end to add BAA for the agenda for discussion.
GBEAA. Okay. All right.
Okay. So
we can go on. Sorry.
Okay. Are there any concerns or questions about GBEAA? Okay. Hearing none, I move that we approve GBEAA as currently written. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none.
Sue Kay. Yep.
Hold, please. Linda wasn't looking when we called the vote. This is Board Member Bove. You said GBEAA, and that's related to, I'm sorry, I wrote notes here, and I'm trying to see. Is that the conflict of interest for staff?
No, that was BCB. That's the one.
That's BCB.
No, it is conflict of interest for staff.
But it is still, okay.
Right.
This is, yeah.
For staff, yes, for staff.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Ask for Maria.
Okay, right. Oh, goodness. Okay. Maria, can you give us some background about GBEAA, please? How does that differ from BCB?
So the policies differ in that the BCB policy is specifically for board members, whereas GBEAA is specifically for staff members, so the employees of the agency.
Okay. Is that, okay.
Go ahead, please answer.
No, you go.
So basically, it's just saying that no person employed by ASDB can be directly or indirectly supervised by a close relative unless it's by consent of the ASDB board. A dependent of an ASDB board member cannot be hired by ASDB except by consent of the ASDB board. Spouse of a board member cannot be employed except by consent of the ASDB board. And then it also goes into business relations and vendor relations. So there, what we're talking about is if you have a relative who has a substantial interest in any business that ASDB is carrying out, then you need to refrain from participating in that decision. And then it is also adding language, ensuring that we are training on an annual, I believe it's, yes, on an annual basis, and that we are getting the form on file to acknowledge that the staff has been trained and that they know what they need to do in case of a potential conflict of interest.
Okay. Thank you for that, Maria.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Okay, we can go on.
There's a motion and a second on the table for GBEAA to pass as is. I've got all the ayes. Do I have any opposition?
You've got my eye.
Okay. GBEAA passes as is. Moving on to GCFC.
GCFC is the fingerprinting requirement, and the change that is being made here is that it is not only staff members who need to be fingerprinted as a condition of employment, but contractors, subcontractors, or vendors also need to be fingerprinted as well. This is something to ensure the safety of the students.
Any questions or concerns for Maria on? Okay. I move that we accept GCFC as written. All in favor?
Second.
Oh, second, thank you. Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, GCFC passes. Moving on to IHA. I only had a quick question on this one. Could you just give us a reason why the health and safety piece was taken out of that?
That is a good question, and I presume that it is because this is what the Arizona School Boards Association requested. So it must have some kind of a statutory thing that's related to some recent legislation.
Yeah.
It's kind of been a hot topic.
Yeah.
Education.
Yeah.
Does this preclude us from providing health and safety education to students? And
No.
are we providing health and safety education to students?
It does not preclude us. I believe that we are providing health and safety education. Assistant Superintendent Martin, is that correct?
To my knowledge, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions or comments or concerns related to IHA?
I'm just not sure what to do here.
Well, I'll call for a motion in a minute. I'll call for a motion in a minute. I just want to make sure that anybody who wanted to ask a question or had a comment could put it in here.
I guess I have a comment. This is Board Member Brittany. We heard from the people in the community about how this one lists the recognized days.
Yes.
If we wanted the other days that maybe that specific community member asked for, what does that look like?
Board Member Buchanan, the only ones that we are required to observe under Arizona Revised Statute are 9/11 Education Day and Sandra Day O'Connor's Civic Celebration. This bill was actually, I believe, initially introduced, I think it was introduced in January, and former board member Jantz requested an observation of Disability Awareness Week and an observation of Helen Keller Celebration Day. So I went and I looked to see when Disability Education Awareness Week is, and I looked at Helen Keller's birthday, and so I selected the dates that were closest, and I added that in response to the board member's request. So we could do the same thing if we wanted to. So we, again, what the legislation requires, that's the floor. But we can always go above and beyond, or I should say the board can always choose to go above and beyond. So, and that's what we would be doing with Disability Awareness Week and Helen Keller Celebration Day.
Thank you.
I do know that the campuses do activities for like Deaf Awareness Week as well as for White Cane Day. I know that we've had students participate. And maybe someone else on the board could speak to this. I know that it's a specific week, but is White Cane Day the same day every year?
Ooh, that I do not know, and unfortunately, Ms. Yancarelli is not here to answer that, and she would be the.
No, this is
Gordon.
This is Mike. I can answer that. It's October 15th every year.
Could we?
15th.
Could we then table IHA to also include Deaf Awareness Week and White Cane Day?
Yes, I'd like to do that. And excuse me, Sue-Kay, this is Board Member Bove. I'd like to clarify something else. September is typically considered Deaf Awareness Month. nationally. So some schools do activities throughout the month or pick one week, etc. But just like we just celebrated Black History Month and now we're in Women's History Month, etc. So Deaf Awareness does have the month of September. Is that something that we can include, should include? I know that the deaf community does like a big weekend in September where they have activities and lectures and some fun things, some educational things with families and students. They engage with the school in that activity. So is that sort of related to what we're talking about here? Do we need to put it in policy? Should we put it in policy? Is that necessary? I guess I'm looking for some clarification here.
That's a really good question. If we start looking at, for instance, like Deaf Awareness Month, or when we start going longer than a week, if you look at the language of the policy, it states that you're going to be observing a portion of the school day, educating on this. So if we would be looking at, for instance, like Deaf Awareness Month, are we spending every school day of that month doing, educating on deaf awareness? So the one thing that I would probably tell the board just to think about when you want to make those types of decisions is, are these potential activities, while they're very appropriate for a deaf and a blind school, are they potentially also taking away from the other educational activities that are going on during the school day? So maybe there may be other ways to commemorate.
Okay.
Our teachers are already under so much pressure as it is that I hate to throw one more thing on them.
And as President Neifel said, I would say table it and let's look at it next time.
Maria, the only thing I would say is even within the month of Deaf Awareness Month, they have a recognized week. There's an International Deaf Week and a Deaf Awareness Week within the month. And I think this speaks to a lot of what it is at the heart of the school. We need to make sure that kids feel like they have things that they can accomplish beyond here.
Absolutely.
And I think, highlighting within their school day, deaf and blind people who have made contributions, not just to their own community, but to the world at large, would be an appropriate use of that type of time. And I think if we could add that language, I would like to see that table to include at least those two pieces.
Okay, well, let me see what I can do to massage that language and bring it back in May.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you need a motion that does not pass since it was part of the consent agenda?
I think so, yes.
Okay. I move that we table IHA to include Deaf Awareness Week and White Cane Day revisions, and we will review it upon those revisions.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Sorry, Mike. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. IHBF. Maria, can you just explain to me what the addition, the intent of the addition? Was this just something recommended through ASBA?
No, actually, this was not something recommended through ASBA. This was actually requested by our own staff. Basically, as I recollect, the reason why is because there may be certain instances with homebound services where the campus-based programs would not be considered the least restrictive environment. We, ASDB in general, does not provide homebound services except for the early learning program where we do, where we have services in the homes with parents and infants and toddlers.
Maria, since we're an LEA now, does that change the look of that? Wouldn't the brick and mortar schools be responsible since they are registered students unless you go through IEP process and change of LRE?
That is something that I would want to discuss with our with Melissa DeVries, our director of programming, on that, because I do know that she was the one who actually made this request for change.
I would check into it.
Am I
Yes,
hearing
I
a
agree
motion
on
to
that,
table
Lynn. Yeah.
I am. You are hearing it loud and clear. I motion to table IHBF.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. IKF. I feel like I have to.
That sounds. Credits.
I have some additional clarification on the previous policy. I'm so sorry. I just found the additional clarification. Is it too late to go back?
Go ahead.
So the reason that this was requested is the homebound provision under Arizona revised statutes. It only applies to funding under ADM. So we do not receive ADM. And that is why we're requesting the change. So this does not apply to us because we don't receive that funding.
So do you want to?
I apologize. I'm sorry. I was not quick enough on the draw to look that up.
So we would need a motion to approve that, even though we've.
Or just put it back on.
Just put it back on next
Yeah.
time. We'll just put it back on next time.
put it back.
I'll just make it
Th-
easy.
My apologies. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay, no worries. And then IKF, the graduation requirements.
It's the civics.
I'm going to assume
citizenship
this is
test.
because of statute.
Yeah.
It is because of statute, and this is in regards to the civics portion
Yeah.
of the test. That is part of graduation requirements for the state of Arizona. And at the time, board member Jantz was concerned about ensuring that we were providing accommodations to ensure accessibility for the test for those students that were going to be taking the civics examination. And yes, so I added language to specify that we would do what we needed to do to ensure that we were providing accommodations to make the test accessible.
And those accommodations all have to be in the IEP prior to taking the test. Yep. As long as they understand that, they can't just, we're going to give them the accommodations because this test is hard. It has to be in the IEP from.
Thank you.
So do I have a motion to pass IKF as is?
I so motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, IKF passes. And then LB, I asked to remove, I would like to table this and have further discussion about the additional language. I think this is where we need to start looking at where that line is between the board responsibility and the operations that the superintendent should have. I'm open to hearing anybody's comments or concerns, though.
This is Board Member Bowe. From the last few meetings, I have recognized that the board is taking on more and more responsibility as far as decision making that actually belongs to Superintendent Reichman. And we are taking the responsibility that rightfully belongs to her for ourselves. I don't want the board to be a micromanaging board, which has been what's happening recently. As a board member, it makes me feel uncomfortable taking away responsibility after responsibility. As far as when contracts are renewed, we have to get permission. When we review or change contracts, she has to ask permission. I want to give her all of this ability to make these decisions. She's got the experience. She has the experience from DC at the federal level, from those Department of Education days, and I'm quite comfortable with letting her make the decisions that she needs to make in order to run the agency, because she does have the larger picture of what the agency looks like, while we as board members have a quite microscopic view. We're not in the day-to-day trenches. We know one or two functions, but like she mentioned earlier tonight, I would strongly disagree with this language in this policy. So what do we do? How do we get rid of this?
So, Linda, part of the reason why I pulled this is because ASDB is a state agency, they have to follow state procurement laws. And so any contract that they enter into has to be with a state-approved vendor. They have to follow the state procurement laws. Right. And so in my mind, this is taking away the day-to-day operation responsibility of the superintendent when they are already heavily governed by the state procurement office and those checks and balances that are in place within the payment unit and things like that. There's a system for grants, there's a system for contracts. They have to use a state-approved vendor. If they buy off contract, they have to go through a bidding process. All of that is already in state statute. And so, to my knowledge, and Superintendent Cooper, please let me know if I am wrong in this. We've not violated a SPO contract or any SPO law state procurement office statute that you are aware of.
That is correct, and we are also, as I mentioned last board meeting, looking to receive an exception, being that we operate as an educational environment. So although we are a state agency, we want to be able to have some exceptions to the state procurement rules, and so we are still waiting to receive feedback from SPO on whether or not we can do that, but to answer your question, that is correct.
So I would like to propose we table this and have this language look closer to its original. I would like to see, for lack of a better word, more information in regards to those contracts. I don't know that that is something that we need to approve, though. I would like to make sure that we are aware of that. But I would like to allow the executive team to run the day-to-day of the agency. Mm-hmm. So agreed. I move that we table LB and have it revised to more accurately reflect the responsibility of the board and the agency, that line in the sand, so to speak, getting back closer to its original language.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, that motion to table LB carries. Okay, moving on. I think that's the last one on 7.06. Yes. Moving on to 8.01, call to the public for non-agenda items. We have a list. We'll let you talk.
So this is for non-agenda items. The first request we have is Lester, I'm sorry, I don't want to butcher your last name. Nipert, thank you.
Good evening. Respected board members, I'm Lester Neipert. I'm a distance itinerant teacher for the deaf and hard of hearing. So I'd like to thank you for allowing me this time to come forward and voice my concerns on a matter that was brought to the distance itinerant staff's attention, which is the possible dismantling of the distance program and being placed under separate regions. By allowing the distance itinerant program to be dissolved from its current status and placed under the separate regions and regional directors is a disservice to our students and teachers that we serve. Relationships have been built with our students as well as staff. Many of our students have multiple disabilities, so change is not good, but rather having continuity is. By allowing us to be placed under the separate regions brings up many questions, such as, will the teachers continue with their current caseload, or would that be adjusted according to the region? Second, how was the data gathered to determine that placing the distance program under the regions would be a good idea? And lastly, why were none of the distance itinerant staff questioned as to the program being successful or non-successful while it was being managed by Mr. Johnson or as its own entity? It is understandable that doing what is best for the agency is important, but when a program has been making positive progress, why dismantle it? Why make changes without communicating with your staff, the ones accomplishing the mission? I understand that there is a lack of communication within the agency, especially at the two upper levels. But again, to make a decision without communicating with your staff is unprofessional. Communication seems to be an issue at all levels. Case in point, I've addressed issues with leadership in a letter to the board dated January 19th, 2023, and received not one reply. In the world that I come from, we don't discuss issues with leadership in an open forum, so I at least wanted to provide that respect. Ultimately, we need to put our students and teachers first, not as an afterthought or no thought at all. If this is the way that ASDB conducts business and will continue to conduct business, then I will need to question the acceptance of the contract for next school year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next I have is Bonnell.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, President Kneifel, for allowing me the opportunity to comment. I'm so happy and relieved that you have voted to oppose 1402. My name is Banel Aman. I've worked here for 40 plus years. My husband and I love this school. We love ASDB, and we have been worried. But we wanted to share in the successes of our former students who have graduated or who are alumni from this school. And I'm happy to send you some names. There are probably some board members who simply don't know about the successes of our former students. And I'm proud to say and to name just a few names that I can remember. I'm probably missing many. From ASDB, Larry, the interpreter missed the last name, Farovich, graduated and is now a professor at RIT. Juliana Upfell is now a PE teacher at Gallaudet. Julia Knapfel is a PE teacher at a school for the deaf. I honestly can't remember where. Stephen Smith is a managing chef at a restaurant on 4th Avenue in Tucson. Colin Denny most recently gave a great performance of America the Beautiful at the Super Bowl. He performed just this year, in 2023. And he is a professional photographer as well. Brian Billiou is a track driver. Nathaniel Aman, who happens to be my grandson, is a corporate lawyer with Watkins and Lehman law firm in California. From the Phoenix area. Jennifer Ann Cook is a coordinator and promoter for California School for the Deaf in Fremont and just accepted a job on the East Coast and has been called to be the MC at many national conferences every year. Jody Aman is a professor of Deaf Studies at California State University, Northridge. Randy Noriega is an Intel innovator at Intel. Michael Delveo is a radiologist at a hospital near my home. Robert Hatch is an administrator here in Mesa. Katie Florich is a manager at Chase Bank. Stephen De Silva is a teacher at Gallaudet University, and his brother, Kevin De Silva, is a real estate agent. He's a broker here in Phoenix. Megan Tellefson teaches here. She's here somewhere in the audience. The reason I share that and why I'm so glad that you have decided to oppose SB 1402 is because the potential ramifications of that bill being passed is that I don't know that we could be able to make more success students like I've shared. Let's celebrate together and oppose SB 1402 together. Oh, gosh! Harvey just reminded me, I forgot one of the most important ones, Troy Kotzer. I'm sure you all know who he is. Our very famous American actor, Troy, who just won the Oscar last year. He was a student here at PDSD, believe it or not. So thank you so much.
Next, I have Addison Castro.
Hello, my name is Addison Castro. Thank you for calling my name. Why I submitted my paper to speak is because I want to stand up against what has happened to my best friend, Caden. He was oppressed by a teacher. I'm from a different school now, but I went to 3rd and 4th grade here, and I decided to transfer to a different school instead of PDSD. I go to a Pembroke Elementary School now, and it's a mainstream school, but I decided to do that, and then I heard what happened at PDSD, and I decided to get involved and find out what was going on, because PDSD is my old school, and this school is very valuable to me. It's an important part of my life. This is a very important part of my life, and I don't want to see this happen. I heard what happened with that teacher, and it really made me very mad. It made me cry. I was crying that night, and I was not happy. I want this situation to stop. And I wanted to tell the board that this system, that this is not a game. That we are not playing around. This is not playtime. We, as deaf people, members of the deaf community, we are a family. And we are not easy to be tricked by hearing people. Some hearing people are fine and they aren't bad, but some hearing people do want to oppress deaf people, and we do not accept that. When a hearing person oppresses a deaf person in a deaf school, we do not want to allow that kind of thing to happen. We do not want to be oppressed in this environment. I am not happy about what happened here, and there are a lot of people who are not. And I'm very sad for my friends, my friend Caden that goes here still. I don't want to lose him. I don't want anything bad to happen to him. And I don't know what's going to happen if he's going to transfer to a different school, but his mom said that he wants to. I don't want him to go. But it might be better for him. This system is not okay. We are not okay with this happening here. Carrie Gamar should not be allowed to be in the cafeteria and around the students. She doesn't seem to care. She is violating these boundaries, and she's going around these students that she's not supposed to be around, and being around them for more than 30 minutes when she's been told not to, and that is not acceptable. I support this school, but I want to speak out against what has happened here on behalf of my deaf family. And I don't want things like this to happen to my friends. This school is a very important and treasured part of my life. I'm really nervous, but I wanted to be brave because I want to help these students stand up against what happened here. I don't want this to lose this school, and I don't want hearing people to take over it. This is a school for the deaf. Remember, again, this is a school that is very important and valuable to me and to my community, and we do not want to lose it. It is my old school. I don't want to lose it. A lot of my friends are still here. I know these teachers. I know these teachers that have had a positive impact on my life. I want to help them protest. I want to help them speak out against this. Hearing people are taking over this school and turning it into a hearing school, and that is not acceptable. I don't want people to lose their jobs, but I heard that some people are leaving. They're going to different schools. We don't want to see that. What happened to the teacher who's oppressing students, who did that to Caden? That is not acceptable. You called my friend a wild animal. You called my friend a wild animal. I do not accept that. I am angry. It's infuriating that Carrie didn't listen to the other teacher and continued to call Caden a wild animal and told him that he shouldn't be in this school. My friends have special needs. He's deaf. He can't hear himself making noises. It's very, very frustrating and really upsetting for everyone involved. And he tries to stop, but he's still my friend, and we shouldn't allow people to hurt our friends. I just don't want people to hurt each other.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Next up to speak is Amy Young.
My son would like to say something first. I'm going to share my time with him if that's okay.
I'm just really worried because my friend Caden is really depressed because of the way that Carrie treated him, yelling at him in front of this class for like half an hour. And she called him a wild zoo animal, said she was going to call 911 on him. That's not kind. It's really rude. And Caden didn't know what to do, and he's like, I can't control it. And I know that. And the other teacher tried to tell her to stop, but she just kept going. She just kept yelling at him. And we've been worried. This has been a problem every day. It just feels, I'm just really worried. Like, Carrie's just not the best teacher for this place.
I just wanted to make a comment about Annette Reichman saying that George Martin was at fault for what happened on November 4th. The other parents and I did reach out to Annette Reichman, the board, and Jill and George, all in an email. And the only response that we got from Annette Reichman was to please refer to Jill, that Jill, the principal, would answer our questions, which then Jill, every time we had a meeting with her, said, no, this is all I can do. It goes above and beyond me. Never once were we told to speak with George Martin. So I think that it's very sad and unfortunate that they're cutting off his contract and not renewing his contract for next year, since he was not, we never were in contact with him. We were never told to contact him. And also, I have no idea why Carrie Gemmer's contract is being renewed. As you've heard from the students themselves, they do not feel safe there. We have 3 injunctions against harassments to this teacher, and you guys still continue to allow her to be at this school. We, as parents and as the students, and the staff members, we're not going to accept this. My son Brody, as he just spoke today, he will be pulled out for next year because it's an unfortunate event. So thank you.
Next to speak, I have Keon Abbott.
Can you see me clearly? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Keon Abbott, and I am a former employee of PDSD, and I wanted to speak because, as you know, there is a teacher here. As a teacher, we don't leave our work on campus. We take things home with us. We hear things. A situation happened with Carrie Gaymar that everyone's aware of now, and it made waves in the deaf community. And what was unfortunate to me, several things really, we're holding the wrong person accountable. We're holding George Martin accountable for this, but Annette is the one who should be held accountable. That situation that happened with Carrie, this was not the first time. There is a long history of this, and everybody knows it. Like, there is a long history of her behavior, and nothing had happened. So when Annette was here the whole time, George is new. He still was learning the system. He wasn't even given a chance. The deaf community obviously responded and made their comments about not understanding why his contract was not renewed. But wow, you chose not to listen to the community. You chose not to listen to the students. You chose not to listen to anyone here. And Linda Bove, who's representing the community, this is really disappointing. What I would like to see is that you revisit this decision of non-renewal for George's contract. That needs to be revisited. You need to listen to the community. Listen to these people first. Listen to the staff that actually work here first. Without the community, without the staff, you don't have ASDB. You don't have PDSD. Thank you.
Next to speak, I have Elizabeth Ibera.
Make sure that I'm visible. Okay. Should I move over? Is this good? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. I graduated from PDSD. I'm an alumni from 2014. I have 3 children. I have children in preschool here. I have a child in 2nd grade. I have a kindergartner, and my baby, my son, is in preschool. So I have 3 children, and for kindergarten and preschool, we have had a significant struggle. With my son, he was left alone. He needed to go to the bathroom, and he was left on his own, and something happened with the metal lock, and he was left on his own, I think outside, because there was some problem with the door getting locked accidentally. And with my daughter, one of the staff members grabbed her, and she fell and hit her head and was bleeding. So I had to come to the school, take her to the ER. She had to get 4 staples in her head. And with my baby, he was running, and he ran up to a gate, and the gate hit him, and he was bleeding from the head, and there was blood all down his shirt. So we've had 3 very concerning incidents, and the teachers didn't communicate well about what was going on. The doctor said that this, didn't really make sense. The nurse called my mother, not me, twice, called the children's grandmother, not me, their mother. And I did talk to the nurse and say, she's not the point of contact. These are my children. You call me. You tell me what's going on. My mom has a job. She's busy. That's not her job to worry about my kids. But the preschool, I feel like at this point we're talking about teachers abusing children. This looks like abuse. The safety of our children, it should be priority. When I come to get my kids, or when my kids come home, I'm not getting communication as to what's going on. I've got a kiddo in preschool who's still not signing fluently, and I don't know what's going on with that. I'm very frustrated. And I hope that as we move forward, this school will prioritize the safety of all of our students, especially our preschoolers. With the nurse calling me on FaceTime, she explained that my little one had hurt his head and was bleeding, and I had to tell her at that point, don't call my mother about my children, call me. So that's what I wanted to say.
Next I have PV Jans.
Thank you, President Kneifel and Assistant Superintendent Martin, Assistant Superintendent Cooper, and Superintendent Reichman. I'd like to touch on a few things that are non-agendized, and I would like for the board to consider. First, this may be a policy addition, but any board member who is appointed to the board who is not familiar with deaf culture or not familiar with the blind or VI community should be mandated to take training on deaf culture, awareness, etc. And the same goes with VI, essentially those training experiences that are offered where they expose individuals to what it feels like to be blind or visually impaired. That I think would help to educate board members and make sure that they are well aware of the impact of the decisions they're making on these students. I also suggest that you consider a policy that would have a student government be involved with the board. Students should have a voice in their school. The board is making all of these decisions for them. Where's their voice? Where's their involvement? They should be part of this process. Any action item that the board is voting on that directly impacts the students The students have a right to contribute their viewpoint, their experience, their perspective, whether they support it or don't. Not just parents. They're not the only experts here. These kids are on this campus every day. Let them be engaged. Let them be involved. Teach them what it's like to advocate from a young age. Teach them what the civic process is from a young age, because it's important for them to engage in that, so that they continue to do so when they grow up and they can be successful adults and advocate, push for change and improvement in their own community. I also suggest drafting a policy specifically about a dual role training. Again, staff have conflict of interest. What happens when a staff is bullying a student? What happens when you have a staff member involved protecting their child on campus for inappropriate reasons? There should be a policy drafted to provide guidance on how to address those kinds of situations, because we have a pattern of abuse. We're taking advantage of the lack of policy, where we need to document what appropriate procedure is in those situations. My son is an example of these issues. Another student came to him and said, he was a perfect example of this as well. Last, but I would say most important, there needs to be a policy establishing help with formal ASL instruction. We don't have that for our little guys, for our young kids. Where is their formal instruction in ASL? How are they learning it? How are they improving their reading skills? How are they learning to appropriately express themselves, reflect on their own feelings and opinions? Yes, they're learning, but the only formal language, that instruction that they're receiving, is in English. And that's not a bilingual educational model. We need to be following a bilingual approach and philosophy of education, which values equally both cultures and languages. Thank you for your time.
Next, I have Jose Ramirez.
Hello, my name is Jose. I graduated from PDSD. I'm an alumni. In May will be my 10-year reunion. I grew up here. This is my home. AG Bell as an organization, how long has ASDB partnered with AG Bell? I didn't realize that. Most of our students get hearing aids, and we had teachers who would use microphones and primarily instruct us using their voices. ASL wasn't a priority. How did that impact our language development? Teachers, Carrie Gamar specifically, to decide to renew her contract means that you're supporting an abuser. It's quite obvious. I remember when I was small, Carrie's room was the place to go when you failed a test. She would line up the students, force them to study, while she would be joking and making fun of us on the sidelines. And to see that this is still going on today, it's time to stop. This has to stop. This is hurting your students. I'm glad that you've decided to oppose 1402, but we need more action. Thank you.
And last to speak, I have Marcy Brarenberg.
Eric also had something to add, so I'm going to share my time.
So you're going to let Carrie keep working here next year. Why don't you care about students? Our students should be safe here. But Carrie bullies us. Students don't feel safe. Our teachers don't feel safe. Other staff members don't feel safe. The school doesn't feel safe. Carrie is so mean to everybody every day and year after year.
I have a lot to say, and I know I'm going to run out of time. First, it really sucks to hear George Martin being used as a scapegoat, to see the bus railroaded right over him, and Annette not to take any responsibility for what has been going on. He has been here since the summer. This has been going on for decades. That is a completely unfair position to take for him on this account. As far as policies, we have a ton of policies. I'm a hospital worker. I'm a nurse. Policies at my work are like the flippin' law. Here, they're like, we follow them when we want to. If it's a little bit convenient, we follow it. If not, we don't follow it. And that's unacceptable in my opinion. I have been told that there's a lot of red tape and that the ADOA is involved, but the policy says that Annette could have taken action on this. It specifically says it would have been left up to the superintendent for discipline. I have started nearly memorizing these policies because it has become important for my child's safety. This is my child's safety. What do we know about school shooters in this day and age? This school is raising them by allowing abusers on campus. God forbid any of these kids ever feel the need to take such an action because this campus allows abuse on it. You guys welcome the abuse and you actually ask for it to continue by extending these contracts. You are negligent towards these children. These are our kids. They are important members of this community, and you show them absolutely no regard by allowing her to continue to work here. People should not have injunctions against harassments on teachers for their behavior on campus. That is absolutely unacceptable. For you guys to completely ignore what these kids have told you, to ignore what the community has spoken out about, to ignore your own policies and procedures, to not compel ADOA or whoever would be stopping you from getting her off of this campus. That's unacceptable. You guys are bystanders in this, and you are allowing it to continue. In addition, I want to talk about the JII that PV mentioned earlier. It does state that these complaints should be handled within 2 weeks. And in fact, it does say that students who submitted complaints and should have the conclusions discussed with them and actions be taken as a result so that they know what came of it. I filed one of these. Annette failed to let us know, so did Jill, that it was completed. We didn't get to know what was found. That wasn't shared with us. Again, failure to follow policy. Where the Ombudsman is concerned, I did submit a request. I did ask for help. I asked for policy explanation. She told me we understood the situation better than she did. I asked for additional help. I told her when I submitted the JII complaint, never heard from her again. We did start going to lawyers, and they just told us to take that off the plate because she wasn't helping us, and she didn't think that that was going to get us anywhere. It's very unfortunate that parents have to spend a lot of money on lawyers to get consultations to figure out which directions to go. OCR is now investigating this school because we were able to find that as a contact option because the school didn't take any appropriate action towards Carrie. They didn't communicate with us. Annette has refused to meet with us as a group of parents. That's unacceptable. The board did not feel compelled to meet with us, and I made those requests. I don't know if that will change now that the president has changed, but these actions are completely unacceptable from this board and from this administration. Leadership is failing students. My son deserves a safe education. All of these kids deserve to be safe at school. Stop protecting the abusers.
8.02, discussion and possible action items, agenda items for the next regular board meeting that's scheduled for May 11th in Phoenix.
We'll need to put on the agenda the election of a new president.
Okay. Leticia, are you taking these down? Awesome. Thank you. I would like to have Maria maybe send out for review policy BAA per Linda's request. And I have two things specifically. I would like to, and I don't know if I need to have this, it wouldn't be for the next meeting. I would like to call a special meeting before the next regular board meeting, possibly over Zoom very quickly to really be informed on the legislative update and what we as a board can do to take action. And then the other thing I'd like to maybe have the IT services talk to us about a little bit is website access. I know that videos are done descriptively, and I'm hoping that things are at least closed caption, but as mentioned today, I would really like to see that there's full access in ASL to any of that web content, including the policy. And if there's an employee handbook separate from the policy, I think that also needs to be done in ASL. Those are my things that I'd like to see. Is there anything else? Linda.
This is Board Member Bove. I've got three things. One is to change the policy regarding establishing a new committee. Currently, it is my understanding that the only standing committee is the Finance Committee. And I would like to change that language in the existing policy because it says only. I'd like that removed. And I'd like the policy to reflect that committees can be established where 3 or more board members serve. And particularly, I'd like to see a policy committee so that we can really thoroughly go through all of these. Trying to do it at the board meeting, it's difficult to ask questions, discuss, understand, and fully prior to the board approving them and voting on them. I would also like to add BAA. Evaluation of the school board, our self-evaluation as a board. I'd like to talk about how we do that. How do we do that self-evaluation as board members? What does that procedure look like? Following ethical practices and responsibilities. The power and authority of the board. Are we in compliance with the way that we should be operating? So I'd like to look all that. I do believe that there are things in policy regarding ethics and self-evaluation, but we are not currently following them. So those are the things that I would like on the agenda.
Anything else?
Oh, Suke. One more. Sorry. I would like to have an agendized item regarding, hang on. Talking about RFPs and the contract with Desert Voices, for example, I would like to go back to that conversation and potentially retract the changes to that policy. I would like to have that conversation at the next board meeting in some depth. How can we go back and potentially retract what we agreed to at previous board meetings? Because I believe with RFPs, there's something to that. I'm not sure if we're allowed to do that or if the ASDB does that, but I would like to have more information about that.
Okay, hearing nothing else, 9.01.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Seconded.
Can I make a comment before we adjourn?
Absolutely.
Real quick? This is Board Member Buchanan. I just want to recognize all the young people that stood up and spoke to us today and just shared. Like, it makes me, I'm a mom. It makes me so proud to see young children just standing up and advocating, not only advocating for themselves, advocating for their families, their friend, and their community. You guys are amazing, and thank you so, so much for being brave, even if it was really scary, to stand up and do that. You guys are amazing. You guys are going to be changing the world, and I'm so proud to see you guys do this. Thank you so much.
We are adjourned.
Yes. Thank you.